So really it has a huge effect, but the caveat is in absence of self-awareness. So in absence of actually pulling back the curtain and really asking yourself very basic and fundamental questions as, is this really lighting me up? Is this really making me come alive? Is this really giving me juice and joy? Is this, what is this feeling and emotion and thought process that's coming up every time I'm around this person, in this situation, doing this type of work, eating these types of foods? Like all of this is just shining a light
Mm.
on the very fabric of who you are, and then having the, I guess, courage to then start to embody and live your life that is congruent with those values. And unfortunately, it comes at a cost.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for coming onto the LiFability podcast. I am really excited to have this conversation with you, and it's really interesting because this week there have been few things that have been popping up, and a lot of that has to do with, mindset beliefs, subconscious programming, and yeah, just exploring self-sabotage. So
Mm.
I am really curious and, wanting to start this off with maybe you talking a little bit about your first experience with a breakthrough with self-sabotage.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, firstly, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you. And yeah, I love these conversations. I think like when we're talking about self-sabotage, it's a large part of my experience personally has been in retrospect, like sort of fumbling and falling and making mistakes, and the curiosity of wondering why I do the things that I do has led me down the path to, different things, different modalities, different ways of living, thinking, feeling, being. And over the years, certain teachers have just sort of rocked up in my life and kind of showed me the way. So your first experiences really is probably at a very young age. I was lucky enough to do some training with Anthony Robbins, and that kind of led me down the path of values and belief systems and kind of just challenging my worldview. But I guess the challenge is like what I coach and what I teach is I kind of left that part of Adrian right there and thought like these are my values, these are my belief systems. And at 19 years of age, I just parked all of that. And then fast forward, 25 years with marriage and business and children and all those sorts of things. And then only realizing that, hey, my paradigm of the world's changed. The way I see things is quite different, and the way I think, feel, and behave is very different to what I was 25 years ago. And then it kind of started to make sense as to, why I was procrastinating, why I was maybe um, thwarting opportunities that were coming my way, as opposed to leaping with some excitement and joy into it. I was kind of like talking myself out of good deals, right? And I guess sabotaging my relationship, sabotaging my health, sabotaging my wealth. All of these things started to become more and more apparent as I started to drill down into why I operate the way I operate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned procrastination. So was that a behavior that you noticed that was really common with, all parts of your life?
Mm, absolutely. Putting things off, saying to myself that maybe now is not the right time, having a default answer of just no, even though in my heart of hearts, I really wanted to say yes, but before I could even think, no would come out as the answer, just rejecting opportunities. Absolutely. That has plagued a good portion of my life, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I guess, something that comes to me right now as we're speaking is how much of that is related to the attachment theory? So, you know, how they talk about anxious, avoidant, dismissive, and it's like which one comes first? It's like chicken and the egg, right? Is it the attachment or is it the belief systems? But then where are the belief systems coming from? Are they coming from our nurturing environment, our natural environment? And so, you know, just pulling back that thread with procrastination, and you noticing your own patterns, would you say you were driven more towards an avoidant attachment style early on, before you start to get a little bit more aware of what was going on for you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. My experience has been is that when I look into the childhood, um, like that have maybe shaped me as a child and the way that my parents were and things like that, I definitely lean towards more of an anxious attachment style. So it was sort of fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, those sorts of things. And I guess the mirror of all of that is pushing away opportunity and staying small as a result of me trying to protect myself. As I fast forward into relationship, yeah, most certainly. Anxious attachment still shows up and has showed up for quite a while. But I think more to the point is like when you start to become aware of these situations, and I think that there is a really good need for a lot of people to investigate into values, belief systems, attachment styles, love languages. All of these things make sense at some point in time in your life. But I guess the fault that we always have, or I think most people do, is that they kind of fall into this trap of trying to uncover one more fault, one more problem, one more reason to maybe pinpoint why I'm the failure that I am, or why my relationships keep stuffing up, or why I can't make any money. So um, I
I
don't
feel
know.
like I feel like you're talking to me right now in my overthinking brain.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's and also I don't know how deep you want to go into this, but
Oh,
I my
as you're comfortable
yeah,
with.
nice. Okay. So how's this for you, right? Go into all the childhood wounds and things like that and attachment theory, and then, like I said, come up with I am I'm anxious attachment, and it makes sense because, from a love language perspective, physical touch, words of affirmation, these are my love languages. So this all makes sense when I go through periods of when I was younger, how I was feeling the need for approval from my father, for example, and having some abandonment issues and all that kind of stuff. Definitely makes all the right sense. My previous marriage, makes total sense how I kind of lent towards uh, like a person that was kind of fulfilling that void that I was trying to find in my father. And they were more avoidant, I was more attached. We had that sort of dynamic going on. When I went through a business breakdown during COVID, had a marriage breakdown, I had all sorts of things going on. And so everything kind of stripped apart, and I was able to take some space to kind of like go within and try and figure these things out. I don't want anyone else in my life. I just want to deal with me and kind of uncover and scratch the surface of who I really am, and then build this version of Adrian back up again that I can then step into and then project myself onto the world as a newly formed person, rebuilt, right?
Mhm.
So interestingly enough, though, I found a partner and we've got, the same similar love languages. However, we have a tendency that she's more leaning on the anxious attachment side, and me going through the work that I've gone through lean more towards avoidance. So, like, things have changed depending on your environment. And that's a large part of what I teach and what I model in my own life is your environment, whether it be your internal environment or whether it be your external environment, there's something that's going to come up with anyone that wants to scratch the surface and go a little bit deeper into this self-actualization and realizing that how much of of an effect that your environment has you. It's either going to be someone, something, or some circumstance that is affecting how you think, feel, and act. And when you start to maybe move some of the chess pieces, and sometimes they might have to completely be removed, and sometimes they might have to shuffle around, and you start to work your way into a system and a rhythm and a pattern of existence that is conducive and incongruent with your values and your belief systems and your love languages and your attachment styles and all those sorts of things, you start to kind of evolve and move and bend in a different way. So yeah, I don't know if that makes all sense to you, but it's kind of an exciting evolution, I guess, in terms of your progression.
I completely agree with you, with what you're talking about with the environment, showcasing different parts of you. And there's a saying that goes something along the lines, whatever you're seeing in your environment is a reflection of you.
Mm.
And so you said you came from an anxious attachment, but then you've seen parts of an avoidance attachment style. And whether that's really anxious or avoidant, or it's our nervous system just coping with whatever experiences that we're being faced with, that's again something that we definitely explore. But going back to values and belief systems, I want to know your thoughts because we can have values and beliefs, um, and how much are those ingrained in us as in from our environment, and that's what we pick up and that's what we believe,
Mhm.
and how much of it is from our innate selves. And then as we progress through life, we can get to a point where we sort of get stuck in those old belief systems. But as we're evolving, maybe those belief systems also change. But we're so stuck in our identity as whatever was going on for us, to then be able to shift to this new belief system.
Yeah, I totally get it. I think it's a great question. And again, if I draw from my own personal experience, I think that a large part of our belief systems are borrowed. So, in the absence of self-awareness, then you have no option but to borrow your beliefs and value systems from someone or something else. So, whether that be your mum and dad, who you grow up with, or whoever was nurturing you as a child. And then the rest of it is this sort of massive propaganda machine that's always operating 24/7. So it's the books that you read, and it's the news that you watch, and the music that you listen to, and it's the people that you surround yourself with. So really it has a huge effect. But the caveat is in absence of self-awareness. So in absence of actually pulling back the curtain and really asking yourself very basic and fundamental questions as, is this really lighting me up? Is this really making me come alive? Is this really giving me juice and joy? Is this, what is this feeling and emotion and thought process that's coming up every time I'm around this person, in this situation, doing this type of work, eating these types of foods? Like all of this is just shining a light
Mm.
on the very fabric of who you are, and then having the, I guess, courage to then start to embody and live your life that is congruent with those values. And unfortunately, it comes at a cost. It comes at stripping yourself to the point where you say, this is who I think I really am at the moment, because I think circumstances can change that. You would agree, right? Like you might have a particular value system or a belief around health, which is, I don't really need to exercise. I'm happy with my body and my physique and everything like that. I'm totally fine until you have a health scare, which might give you a stroke or leave you with a heart attack or some sort of detrimental effect on your health. And then all of a sudden, your values around health will change. You're exercising, you're eating better, you're not drinking as much, you don't smoke anymore, all those sorts of things as a result of the catalyst of you having ill health. You with me so far?
Mhm.
So even when we go back to our previous conversation around attachment styles and things like that, well, sure, I recognized that anxious attachment was something that was a part of my life at a particular time. And now, having found a partner who's leaning more towards anxious attachment and watching myself go more towards avoidant, that's just another thing to look at. So the same reasons as to why am I feeling an anxious attachment emotion towards wanting to connect or wanting to be a part of or fear of abandonment or fear of rejection or not being seen or heard or self-value, like what is that whole reflection there? But equally, when you're looking at an avoidant, that's just something else that I need to work out as to why am I feeling this way at this time. So again, if we go loop back over to your values, sure, they're so intertwined with your environment and how you were brought up. Because if you're brought up with a scarcity mindset around money, or there's a lack mentality around resources and things like that, that is going to shape the way that you see the world, because right in front of you is evidence that is true.
Hmm.
So do you believe that two things can be true at the same time?
100%. 100%. I believe in duality and polarity and the fun parts of life, right? But very
Absolutely.
interesting that you say that because as you were saying that, freedom as a value came to mind. And like you're saying, depending on your childhood and how you grew up, whether it was a scarcity or an abundance mindset, it was going to shape potentially what you view as what freedom is, right? And so I guess to explore that a little bit more, and freedom being in one aspect financially or just financially successful, um, but also equitable on the other aspect, right?
Mhm.
So, so not just creating wealth for yourself, but creating wealth for the bigger good, really, so that everybody can access that. But then, if you grew up in a child in a family environment where money was something that was scarce, and now you're driven to make so much money so you don't feel that scarcity. Um, at what point is that a value that you really value?
Mm.
The double-edged sword, right? Or how much of it is you try to prove a point to yourself, maybe to your family, whatever it is, whatever I guess relationship you might have had. But the other side to it is also, you could grow up in that sort of an environment and then not be at that point where you want to create all this financial success. Uh, you're subconsciously losing everything, whether that's through addiction, gambling, whatever it is, right? And so those are some of our pains that we can explore, but also, how much of it is value driven from us innately, like what's as a spiritual being, like that's what we want, and that's
Yeah.
what we want to create, and how much of that is our humanness and our ego.
Mm. So this is a really good one because I had the belief system that money is not really my driver, and the way that I would operate through life was that I'm really about passion and purpose and just doing the things that I love. So everything that I've gravitated towards during my 25-year business life is not, I haven't done one thing for 25 years. I've done several things for 5 to 10 years at a time. And so I always have this, I guess, roundabout way of starting something and finishing something, and then getting to the point where perhaps I'm due for another business or a different type of way of living and being and things like that. But with respect to money, I've always found that my belief was that money is not my driver. But And when I made really good money, I tend to have this feeling of like, man, I can't believe I'm making so much money, but I don't know where it's all gone. I tend to squander it or push it away or just sort of not so much waste it, but just have these fleeting moments of like earning good money and then not good money and then earning good money, not good money. So until I lost everything, until I started to realize just how much of a skewed value that I had of money. And then when I challenged my belief systems to say, why can't I value money and value passion and purpose? Why can't the two be aligned? And the moment I made that shift is the moment that I started to see a lot more abundance and a lot less angst and worry about not having enough.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I think again we're tying back to challenging your belief systems. Why do you believe the things that you do? So when we both agreed that two things can be true at the same time, when we're talking about money, that someone might be listening to this and saying, but there isn't a lot of money going around. Okay, interest rates are really high. Inflation is at an all-time high. Government spending is at an all-time high. Just look at the poverty; it's at an all-time high. All-time high. Okay. So let's put that same lens on and look at the evidence to suggest that there is actually no scarcity and no poverty at all. We're talking about trillions of dollars being moving around the planet at any one time. If you went to empty everyone's ashtray and console of their car that holds all the coins and their wallets and purses, and you think about how many people are making expensive transactions at the moment, you quickly realize that there's just a lot of money going around. I mean, we could have this conversation and be worried about making a $500 purchase, and someone right this minute is probably making a $50,000 purchase on a watch, right? Just something that they is a frivolous thing to them. So what's the difference? Are we living in the same reality and timeline or not? And I guess we are. The truth is that what's true for you about money and what truth is true for me about money is also true. You said before, like, what you bring about, what you think about, you bring about, you definitely can attract the people, places, circumstances, and events and situations into life based on the way that you think, feel, and act. That's just what it is. When you
Mhm.
start to think about money more as a energy and a frequency, and then you start to think of yourself in a vibration and frequency, well, then raising yourself to the level of there's abundance in the world and there's no shortage of anything. Like whether you're talking money, food, water, resources, like this earth is completely abundant. Creation is abundance. Like it's not running out of anything. We're not running out of anything,
And I
right?
guess my question to that is like just considering Maslow's law of hierarchy, right? And safety being something that if we don't have that, nothing else is going to progress any further than that, right? And so thinking of someone in a developing country and ourselves in the developed world that we live in at the moment, developed. By the way, I hear an accent and I might be completely incorrect, but is there any South African or
No,
no?
no,
Yeah.
it's interesting you say that. You're the first person that's ever said that, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's interesting. No, no, no South African accent here.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Anyway, back to my point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you were talking about abundance and it bring or money just being a creative source or energy. But for
Mm.
someone who is really struggling to put a roof over their head, right? Or just getting the food in their bellies,
Yeah.
compared to someone who's paying $50,000 to go and get a watch. Would you say that they still have the same sort of limiting beliefs that are keeping them in that state?
Well, that's a great question. I guess fundamentally, yes, but also it's their environment. And I'm not saying that um, everyone has a choice in that particular respect, because if you're living in a particular area that is, like you said, a underdeveloped or third world country, and they don't have the ability to find the resources that they need, then yeah, that's an absolute challenge. But I think if we really boil it down to what is the truth and what is reality, well, I can think of, a few stories over the years that I've heard of people just coming from, impoverished nations and circumstances, or coming from absolute loss and tragedy, and rebuilding themselves to the point where they have success and abundance. So what would you call that? Would that be mindset? Would that be a value system? Would that be not living in the container that is provided for you, to say that look at around you in your environment, everyone else is poor and miserable, and there's war, and everyone's getting bombed and all that sort of thing. It's all equally sad, but at the same time, I would say, thinking about it out loud, that everyone has a choice and there is an option to move towards or away from anything to do with scarcity or abundance. And I think that is, it's, I know it comes with a lot of nuance and caveats and what ifs and buts, but that's what I feel is to be true.
Oh, I agree with you, and there's definitely a mindset game that they are probably playing, whether that's conscious or subconscious. And I
Mm.
guess it comes back to me asking about your own situation, where when you lost everything, you could have gone into a frame of mind of fuck this shit, everything's so screwed up, and just in that really victim mindset. And maybe you were there for a little bit, right? Because we have to go
Mhm.
through that. It's a journey. But what got you out of that and back on your toes and, moving onwards and upwards?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had all of those moments. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? The whole victim mindset. I'm a good person, mostly. So it's like, I haven't done anything completely wrong in my life. Why is this happening to me? And yeah, the whole fuck this shit, fuck the government. Like, you just, feeling like everyone was against me and wanting to fight. That was a large part of going through, like, particularly the pandemic, the business closures, and then post separation and all those things, certain things. Yeah, you definitely go through that. But I do believe that in order to appreciate the light, you need to know the darkness. And they just got a point in life where I had really nothing. I had really nothing. Like, I'd lost my business, then subsequently my marriage, and then after that, it was kind of just the whole destruction of marital assets, and people chasing me for money, and just situations like going to buy food, and just having this gut-wrenching fear of, I don't know if this is going to, if my card's going to reject this money. And also having moments where my card was rejected, and you're just like, I don't have enough money to cover this, and having to put things back, or just walk away and not buy any food that day, or whatever it may be. So
And
amongst, sorry, amidst all of that was this point of, for me, the turning point was, well, if I have nothing at this point, then what are my opportunities that I can now explore coming from nothing? So that was really the turning point. It was like, well, I feel, and then I had this kind of sense of, or a wave of optimism, a wave of opportunity. Okay, well, if I've got nothing that anyone can take away from me anymore, then what are my opportunities that I can now create out of nothing? And then my mind just started moving towards, well, there are things that you have within your, left and right ear that you can kind of utilize. And what I did have was 20 plus years of experience in business. I had a knowledge of marketing. I had a knowledge of technology and social media and things like that. I had contacts. I had people that I could reach out to. I have the ability to negotiate. So I was kind of just like working with my brother, and my brother just said to me, um, hey, look, there's an idea that I have told heaps of my workers. My brother's a concreter, right? So I was laboring for him, and he's like, you could probably just seal driveways. And what that means is you don't pour the fresh concrete, you take an existing driveway or a concrete path and you clean it up and you put like a protective sealant or a colored coating on top of it to make it look new again. And there's a whole industry in this, and you don't need many qualifications. You don't need enough, you don't need many materials. You don't need to outlay a lot of expenses. So I dwelled on it for about a week and I started to do some research. And I had this moment where I was like, you know what? In my previous business, believe it or not, I opened up a indoor skate park. And part of the renovation of that indoor skate park was polishing the floors and making it all smooth for the skateboarders and scooter riders and bike riders that were in there. So I'm like, I have kind of done my apprenticeship in this very field that my brother had mentioned. So you could call it woo-woo, you could call it the stars aligning, you could call it synchronicity or whatever you want to call it. It is what it is.
Mm.
I just got to utilizing all of those assets that I still had that no one can really take away from any of us. And I started to piece together an idea, a business idea, a plan. I come up with a name and then I registered a domain name, and that only costs like, $50 or $20 for 1 year or something like that. So I kind of had that kind of money. It's not like I had nothing in my bank account at that time. And then I utilized some contacts and I said, hey, listen, I've got this idea. I can't pay you right now up front for your services, but I can pay you out of the jobs that I get in the future. So I created that relationship with a marketing contact of mine and friend, and just went from there and started to get in front of eyeballs to eyeballs, belly to belly, face to face, and started to negotiate pricing and all the rest of it. And finally got one job and then two. And then, a couple of years later, this is a multi six-figure business. It allowed me to then branch off into other things. And as you may know, like I podcast and I coach and I write books and I help people with their mindset. But that's my lived experience is from all of that. And I guess in a long-winded way, like that was really the turning point for me. But I've had multiple turning points like that throughout my life. So it was just a matter of getting out of my own way and saying, hey, listen, you've got a choice here. You can be a victim or you can be the victor. So which one is it?
Yeah, amazing. And there are two things that are being highlighted for me from everything that you've shared. The first one being you probably need to have an open, a growth mindset when you're moving through any sort of adversity, right? Otherwise, you stay in that victim um, mindset. The other thing is, and I don't know, so you probably know a little bit about me with my coaching in the lifestyle and well-being space, right? And so I look at it, there is no balance, right? It's just using our optimal selves. And when one area of our life, so in your case, the financial health probably wasn't at its optimal state at the time, and probably your mental health was not at its peak, but you had your physical health, you had your relational health, which is where your contacts came in play, and whatever you were going through, either I guess awoke more of that spirituality in yourself, made it deeper, um, or there was already that you tapped into, and so it's really interesting how you've just described an experience, and here I am sitting and nodding down in in my brain. It's like this is so cool. This is really exciting because the more that you try and focus on the area that's not working, it doesn't really work that way, right?
Mm,
When you start opening up and realizing all these other gifts that you actually do have and start tapping into that, the area that's not working magically happens.
yeah, that's a good point.
Mm. And so when we're trying to rewire our belief systems, what have you found the best way that has helped you um, in the most effective manner? Because there are things like, auto suggestion or affirmations or, um, looking at things from a different perspective and trying something different. What has been your biggest win?
Mm. So I think like when you go into psychology, you've got this kind of this Jungian approach of like looking into the past and trying to identify certain things about how you grew up and your role models and all those sorts of things. Um, then you've got who's that other fella? Adler. He talks about just kind of understanding that that's where it is, making it conscious, but don't dwell there and just move on to the actions that you need to take in order to move away from a situation you don't want to be in. If you ever read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, yeah, he's about in any given moment, whether you're, in the deepest, darkest, soul-destroying moments of your life, you have a choice, and that choice is that you can choose another reality for yourself. So I think there's no one right answer. I think all three of them are right. They all have their place and they all have their moments. When it comes back to identifying habits and behaviors and values and belief systems, I think I would promote a great way of doing this is to say, what are, I don't know, maybe one, two, or three areas of your life that you're finding the most challenging moments with at the moment. And then I would write that down. So it's relationships, or it's money, or it's my health. Then I would just quickly say, who else in my family has a money problem, right? Or a health problem, or whatever, a relationship problem. So typically you might look towards mum and dad and you say, yeah, look, there's people in my life that are quite close to me that have the same issues as mine. So then I would probably go a little bit internally and say, well, how does that make me feel? Like, do I feel saddened by it? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel nervous? Do I feel like I'm overwhelmed? Do I feel like I want to retreat, run away? Like, just get in touch with how that feels. If you want to take it a step further, I'd say, whereabouts in my body am I feeling this emotion? Is it the pit of my stomach? Is it in my chest? I'd probably describe it. Is it a tight feeling? Is it a buzzy feeling? Is it a dead weight? Is it something that is really weighing me down at the moment? And then when you start to understand all of that, you can do like a little release process. Like a process that I like is if I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling like it's a buzzy feeling and it's in my gut, I can just talk to that emotion and I can say, anxiousness, I have no use for you anymore. Leave my body now. Okay. And that's just a little mindset shift that helps you just release a little bit of emotion, a bit of tension. It frees up some bandwidth for you to think a bit clearly. But then the critical part is that now that I know this, I can't unknow it, right? I can't just ignore it, otherwise it'll keep coming up. So a very practical way of solving this issue is, well, what are one, two, three things that I can do right now that will move me closer to this true north of health or wealth or relationship? So if it's in the area of wealth, you go, well, I could email someone that I know is wealthy and just ask if I can borrow some of their time. I could listen to a podcast about wealth. I could buy a book about wealth. I could start to learn about saving or shares or cryptocurrency or real estate. Like what are you going to be doing that's going to move you? I could look at my spending habits. I could write down something that each day, like just track what I'm spending and just make sure that I've got a handle on some of the bad habits that I have in relationship. I'm avoidant. I'm anxious. So if I don't know any of that, let's look at attachment styles. Let's buy, Julie Manano's book on attachment. Right? Let's listen to a podcast on attachment. Let's just identify some of those things, and then let's see how it plays out in our life. Then once you know this again, you're like, well, now that I know what to do, now I need to do what I know. So every day I need to put an action plan in. So what are three things I can do every single day that can move me more towards a loving relationship with myself or with my partner, improving my health or improving my wealth, whatever that may be. That's the best way. The best, and then to follow that plan. Everyone's heard of just being 1% better today than what you were yesterday. And my philosophy is like, you don't have to be a 10 out of 10 every day. I think it's unrealistic. I think even the top performers in the world wouldn't be a 10 out of 10 every day. This whole David Goggins, fuck your feelings and just do it anyway and, run 1,000 miles and all that kind of stuff. It may work for a small percentage of people, but for most of us, we need time for rest. We need time for recuperation. We need time to think. We need time to plan. And we need time for action. And we need time to put things into motion. So to expect that you're going to be a 10 out of 10 every day is unrealistic. So I say to my clients, like, just go for 7 out of 10, right? Do 70%. Can you do that? Can you do 6 or 7? That's fine. If you were 60 or 70% winning every week, that's a good number. It's not a 50-50 neutral. It's not losing, it's winning. So you're winning 70% of the week. If you could win 70% of the month, I think you're doing great. If you could win 70% of the year, you'd be amazing.
Mhm.
If you relate this back to being an investor, if 7 out of 10 of your property investments made money, would you be happy or unhappy? You'd be happy. If 70% of the time in your relationship with yourself or with your significant other, everything's great, would you be able to weather? Yes, you would, right? If you were to apply it to any area of your life, 70% is night and fucking day compared to most people who are just drowning.
Mhm.
Most people are the victim mindset that we talked about before. Most people are doing nothing. Most people are underperforming. Most people don't even know the capability that they have. Most people don't even know how divinely perfect they are. Most people are just focusing on the have-nots. Most people are focusing on the things that they are lacking. Most people are focusing on everything that is a detriment to their life. They're focusing on the wars and the lack of money and the famine and the poverty and all that kind of stuff. They're just focusing on more of that negative. So it doesn't take much to rise above the herd.
Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
would be my advice.
Mm. And you know how there is this whole spiel about visioning and manifesting. What are your thoughts on goal setting and its impact on rewiring beliefs?
I think they're hugely important. A lot of people, particularly in the coaching space, tend to poo-poo affirmations or those sorts of things, almost implying that if I have to affirm it in my mind, then I know it not to be true. So why do I need to affirm it? So there's a core belief system that is disrupted there. There's a partial truth to that, but also if you know anything about neuroplasticity, you can rewire the brain.
Mm.
And affirmations, like words are spells. Words have meaning. Words have phonetic meanings. I mean, like, so affirmations for me are important. I certainly have a few that I say on a daily basis. And again, if you're bringing things to awareness, if you're bringing into consciousness, then when you shine a light on some of the challenges that you might have mentally, physically, emotionally, I find that's 90% of the battle. It's like flicking on the light and all the cockroaches disappear. They scatter into the corners. The moment you shine a light on your issues and problems and things that might be plaguing you, it almost seems like it dissolves a large portion of the angst and the emotion and the trouble around it just dissolves immediately. So again, if you marry that with an action plan, I think those two just go hand in hand. So
Mhm.
yeah, does
And,
that
and
answer?
yeah, and I think that was the key, right? You can affirm something, but if you're not following through with an action plan, then there's a very low chance of it actually moving through. I guess
Agreed.
that's been a belief system, but I've also seen that through action. And just to explore that more, let's say someone's got a belief system, I'm not good enough, right? And the affirmation that they're then using is I am enough. They then have to complete certain action steps to affirm that they're enough, right?
Mm.
To rewire that, um, or to actually believe that they are enough. What other ways can you suggest someone can still affirm that belief?
Yeah, great question. Okay, I would say if your if your core belief system is that I am not enough, or uh, maybe you have a lower self-worth or self-value, then I would look for evidence to support that you have value. So again, this is hard for a lot of people because we're just such an expert at hanging shit on ourselves, and we kind of like always focus on the negative versus the positive. Have you ever read that it takes like one unit, 2 units of energy to hold down a negative, right, versus 1 unit of energy to hold down a positive? So it's almost like you've got a larger requirement energetically to hold down negativity, right? So it's a very debilitating, very soul destroying, energy sucking type of vibration.
Mm,
But we can look to evidence to support either way. So you can say, well, I'm looking for evidence now which shows me and supports my ego and my, reticular activating system to say I have no value and I am not good enough.
mm,
But once you flip the switch and start to focus on showing evidence that supports that, as soon as someone says, hey, listen, thank you for having that conversation with me today. It really made a difference. I just felt so much better after sharing what I had to share with you. So rather than saying, oh, no, it's fine, like, yeah, totally right. You might have this internal dialogue to go, you just made a difference in that person's life. You you are of value. Or when someone says, thank you, like I didn't know that. No, you helped me at work or whatever it is, and you just say, I am of value. I do have the ability to help people.
mm,
If you win a job or a business or you're able to buy something for yourself, you can just say to yourself and acknowledge, you know what, I did this on my own. I saved the money, I bought the thing, I did that all by myself. This is a sense of accomplishment. So it's kind of just having these little wins. And again, it goes back to two things can be true at the same time. But you'll find whatever your answers are, whether it be, am I useless and I have no worth or no value at all? And it could also be the exact opposite, as to how valuable and useful you are. And I think innately most of us have this desire to be put to good use, to have some sort of value and purpose. And ultimately, if anyone's listening to a podcast like this, that's the ultimate desire would to be like, why am I here?
mm.
What's the reason why I'm around? What purpose do I serve? And then moving every day in the direction of whatever that is.
What if they're in a state of overwhelm and whenever they ask that question to look for evidence the other way, the response they get is, I don't know.
Mm.
They're stuck in that. How do you, um, I guess, coach someone to move through and shift through that energy?
Yeah, it's probably a little more tricky in that respect, but I would encourage them to uncover why they're feeling the feelings they have, right? So you would just scratch the surface of this is the emotion that I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I'm overwhelmed. Okay, well, whereabouts in your body do you feel it? Again, it's just like, let's identify whereabouts I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel it in my chest. Is that feeling buzzy? Is it tight? Is it constricted? It's constricted. All right. Well, can you describe that feeling for me? It's this heavy, constricted, can't breathe kind of feeling.
Mm,
So I would go much deeper on an emotional level. All
mm,
right. Let's call this buzzy feeling um, and ask our unconscious mind or our higher self to release this trapped emotion, this trapped energy. And I would go through a process of, like I said to you earlier, in this moment, I have no need for this trapped, buzzy feeling. Leave my body now and just allow your body to breathe. It's probably a bit more nuanced again, and it's a bit more in depth, but the person who's constantly overwhelmed is not going to be putting themselves in a position where they can think freely and clearly in order to make educated decisions. They're going to be overridden by their emotions. And as you probably know, emotions aren't always telling the truth.
mm.
Right? They like when have you ever made a awesome decision in a very highly emotional state? Most of us are just the worst decisions we've ever made, right?
Yeah.
So my goal would be to get that person back to at least a neutral position where they could be able to think freely and free up some bandwidth in order to make more intelligent decisions.
And that's probably a big enough step for them anyways, because for someone who's super overwhelmed, they're more likely in shutdown mode, right? So just
Absolutely.
just having that felt sense of that emotion can
Yeah,
probably
absolutely. And from my perspective too, it's like, well, again, we go back to action. So what's one thing you can do right now to help you feel calm and relaxed? So a really good strategy is to say, well, if I'm releasing that emotion, then what is the emotion that I want to feel? I want to feel calm. So just repeat that in your mind. I'm feeling calm, feel calm. What would I do if I'm a calm person? Well, I would breathe deeply. Okay, so now let's take some deep breaths and we're just going to repeat that word calm in my mind. And so when you're calm, calm, I can just feel it now. My body's starting to relax. So what's another thing? What's something else that I can do to help myself feel calm? What would a calm person do in this moment? Probably go for a walk, maybe get outside, put their feet into nature, maybe just put your face in the sun for 20 minutes, maybe read a book, maybe listen to some music. Like, what would that person do? So again, you're taking yourself out of this fight or flight mode and you're taking yourself out of this, um, you know, like amygdala hijacking and bring yourself into your frontal mind, which is more rational and calm, and then you're adding a practical element of, what action can I do in order to solve this problem? Like to me, it's extremely difficult, but it's so simple, right? So it's just that's all my approach. I'm just a mere man. I don't try and overcomplicate things very, very much. I do have a tendency at sometimes to kind of like want to explore every different angle, but if there's a simple process that can get you from A to B, and all you need to do is that, and then get from B to C, just do that.
And I
And
also just,
do that.
I also liked how you talked about what would a calm person do. Like that's bringing in space. So if they can't relate it back to themselves, they
Yeah.
can potentially at least envision or have some ideas around, what that would look like and potentially do that.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, these are my final thoughts on that. There's a version of you that is out there that you can create and step into and bring it right here. So if anyone wants, if we, well, I always use the same sort of three things. If you want your relationships or you want your wealth or you want your health to be in check, well, then do what healthy people do. Do what wealthy people do. Do what safe, secure people do in their relationships. And the more that you do those things, the more likely you would be in order to achieve those results. In a past life, I was into bodybuilding and I used to compete in physique shows and things like that. And you'd take a 3 or 4 month process to strip all the body fat off and reveal all the muscle that you built over the years. But the process of doing that was very, very simple. You needed to increase your energy output and you need to decrease your energy input. So the energy output was exercise and cardiovascular activity and things like that. The energy input was typically fats and carbohydrates and the foods that you ate, right? And it was just a process that if you were starting at 3,000 calories here and you ended up at 1,800 calories here over a 3 or 4 month period, your body fat would just slowly, slowly come down and your lean muscular reveal would happen over that 3 or 4 month period. All you had to do was follow the system and just do the things that people do to lose weight. Right? It just, there wasn't much more to it than that. It was just like, what are you going to do to compete at this comp? Three fucking things: drink water, eat good food, and exercise, right? And just like I said, increase exercise, decrease calories. It was so basic. But the more I followed a plan, the more the higher probability that the result that I wanted was going to be the outcome. And for people like you and I that are creatives and we're sort of like, we want to be, we don't want to be contained. We want freedom. We want this, expansiveness and all the rest of it. To have just have a plan and stay within these lines is confronting. It's sort of like it's a juxtaposition because you're like, I don't want to be, confined to four walls. I want to be free to do whatever I want. But sometimes plans and systems have a sense of freedom within them that allows you to do the things that you do. So, yeah, putting yourself in the frame of mind that there's a version of Adrian out there that I want to become. So I'm going to bring it into consciousness, make it aware, make myself aware of what that version is. And then I'm going to step into that version by embodying everything that that version of Adrian would do in order to become that person. Again, super simple, right?
It's absolutely simple and so funny. You literally read my brain because I was just thinking, structures and systems are so crucial, even for someone as rebellious as me.
That's right.
And the more that I can become friends with that and realize these are actually helpful and not debilitating, that's where the work is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I have a very high distaste for authority, right? So it's one of the things that is definitely deeply ingrained in me that I don't want to listen to anyone and take advice and I don't want to be told what to do. However, there are things that are within my life that if I just listen to the right people and I mold this to the parts of my life that I want to improve, the more I follow a system and get help and just understand that there's someone that has done the things that I want to do. So I just may as well do what they do. And if it aligns with my values, if it's congruent with all of that, if I'm not doing anything underhanded, if I'm not doing anything immoral and I'm hurting myself or others, like I'm good with it, right? So even as a coach and in this coaching space, like I'm about to employ a coach myself and, it costs tens of thousands of dollars and I need that person in my life. If I want to get to where he is in his business life, I need that person in my life. And I just think like, yeah, there's always a teacher out there ready and willing and able to give us, all the wisdom. And that's just repeated through history. True.
Mm. And it comes back to what we were saying earlier, right, about an open and growth mindset. So, you might have a very stringent viewpoint on something, but if you can remain flexible in at least just taking in the information and seeing whether it does align with you or not, and then move from there, that space rather than, thinking you know it all and that's the way it's going to be, and yeah, being really fixed. Um, I can talk to you forever because there are so many tangents that we can go on, and I love having these conversations. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Adrian.
it's no problem.
I want to finish off with three questions. The first one being, how would you like to see the future of holistic health and well-being?
Wow, good question. I would like to see, I think it's evolving this way, and maybe you can tell me whether I'm on the wrong track or right track. I think a lot of people are becoming more and more aware that there are other systems and modalities that can improve their health. I'd like to see it firstly return to, you could call it, say, source. So rather than thinking of the solution to my problem is a pill or a potion or a tablet or something like that, it's actually the removal of toxins, and whether that be thoughts or whether that be feelings or whether that be the food that we ingest, the water that we drink, things like that. So I do feel though that that's where we're sort of heading towards is more of a I feel like that 3,000-year-old ancient healer, witch doctor, that's probably been wrongly casted as a someone who just casts spells and does, voodoo is coming back to the forefront and people are moving towards that. So that's where I think I see health and wellness moving. It's more of a mind, body, spirit encompassed in one.
Yeah, I love it. And it's very resonating to what I envision for hopefully not our very far future.
Agreed.
Second question being, what is your favorite occupation? Occupation being any activity that occupies your time.
What is my favorite?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I love lifting weights. So for me, it's probably if I was going to introduce something else in there, it would be if there's an element of nature and then there's an element of like heavy physical activity, I would add them two in. It's something that really I don't know, just really resonates with me. I've always wanted to be really fit and really strong. And now, even in my like late 40s, I'm 47. I still lift really, really heavy. I still do high intense workouts. I do MMA with my kids and things like that. So they're very, very rewarding. If you can, like again, add in a bit of ocean or a bit of bushwalk or some sort of nature element in there, like I'm good.
Amazing. Sounds epic. Last one being, what are three sources you can recommend for someone who's wanting to shift their mindset?
Ooh. Um, I think that. Geez, that's a great question. For mindset, I would definitely look towards any kind of modality that helps you understand part of your past. Remember, I was saying before, we've got this Jungian approach, which is developed into understanding why you do the things that you do. So I think that's a really key thing. So however you get there, whether it be through love languages, attachment theory, or whether it actually is going into childhood trauma or anything like that, I would definitely look into all of that. I think they're fascinating parts of our psyche that needs to be explored. Um, the other part of it is more towards health. So if I if I was to advise anyone on improving their mindset, I would attach an element of health to that. So whether that be exploring like parts of my life, whether you want to take a leaf out of my book, whether it be weightlifting, for example, mixed martial arts has been a real big game changer in terms of mindset for me. It sounds weird, but learning how to fight and be a fighter and learning how to get hit and realizing that you're not made of glass has been a massive mindset. Now, to everyone, that may not seem that appealing, but if you can find something that's really challenging physically, it puts yourself in a mental state that allows you to feel like when times are tough, your threshold for stress and pressure is already really high. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like
It's like that resilience muscle, isn't it?
absolutely, yeah. I think building a resilience muscle is tremendous. So again, like it goes back to my first point in terms of learning about your past. So you get to understand that there's certain parts of you that you may not like, and then the ability to sit with all of that is a critical part. When you add in the physical element to me just gives you a sense of I can overcome difficult things.
Mhm.
So I think for a man or a woman, it's irrelevant. So whether that thing for you is like hot yoga, like do hot yoga. If you're in very uncomfortable situations like that and you have to move through it and get through the mind fuckery of like, I don't want to do this and get me out of here, that's a really good place to put yourself. And then the last thing I would add into it kind of ties in with the first one is learning emotional resilience techniques. So whether that might be meditation, whether it might be some sort of a energetic release, whether it might be tapping, EFT, it could be any kind of modality like that that allows you to tap into your um, energy emotional body, and able to release those emotions and take away the charge that all of those emotions tend to have if you let them override your body. That's a really powerful position to be in because we have this sort of emotional part of ours out of ourselves, but we also have this high intellect, rational part of ourselves as well. And the marriage between the two is, I think, where all the juice is. So
Mm.
if we're too rational, we miss all the enjoyment, embodiment of like just having those beautiful emotions. If we're too emotional, we're erratic and we're kind of, missing out on all of the things that can make a practical impact on our life. The blend between the two, I think, is like where all the juice is. Yeah, for sure.
So just summarizing that, looking at our past to maybe understand our behaviors and patterns, doing something that builds our resilience. And, I completely agree with you with MMA. I think there's a component of self-discipline and self-control there also, which is so important, right? As we're
Mm.
moving through life. And the last one being emotion regulation and just techniques to build that muscle.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Adrian.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Great to talk to you.